Hi and welcome to Beyond the Screen, myself Rob Taylor and Emma Arneil in discussion about Star of Acre, the latest folk horror from Britain to hit the screens. Sorry for the delay, but normal service has now resumed. This podcast will contain spoilers from the very start, so please ensure that you've watched Star of Acre before listening to this episode. Oh, and in light of recent news, I just want to say that trans rights are human rights, and if you believe any different, then fuck you. On with the show.
It howls, it rains, it snows, it blows, and I am wet through all my clothes. So I prithee, love, let me in. So I prithee, love, let me in. To let you in, that cannot be. There's nobody in this house but me. So I dare not let you in. So I dare not let you in. My dad and mum, they're fast asleep. My brother is up, he's with the sheep. So I dare not let thee in. So I dare not let thee in. You turned him round and whither to go? The storm grew dark and the rain did blow. She called him back again. She called him back again.
Star of Acre unfolds in the 1970s on an isolated farm in the Yorkshire Dales, the inherited home of Richard Willoughby, an archaeologist, and his wife Juliet. Their idyllic rural life is shattered when their young son Owen begins exhibiting strange behaviour, hearing whistling sounds and mentioning a figure named Jack Gray. Tragedy strikes when Owen suddenly dies from a severe asthma attack, and consumed by grief, Richard throws himself into an archaeological dig on their property, driven by his deceased father's obsession with a legendary hanging tree and a supposed spirit entrance on the farm. Meanwhile, Juliet grapples with her loss, seeking solace in the occult and connecting with a local psychic, Mrs. Ford. During his excavation, Richard unearths the bones of a hare, which inexplicably begin to regenerate. Juliet becomes increasingly fixated on the resurrected hare, believing it to be a manifestation of a local pagan spirit called Dandelion Jack, a figure linked to the oak tree in local lore. Legend gleaned from Richard's father's writings speaks of a doorway to the spirit world opened by the sacrifice of a child, a woman, and a man. Driven by a twisted hope, Juliet murders Richard's colleague, Stephen, whom she perceives to be a threat to the hare. And in the film's climax, Richard kills Juliet's sister Harry, completing the triad of sacrifices. The film concludes with a deeply unsettling image of Juliet cradling her hare to her breast, seemingly embracing the horrific reality they have created. Folk horror for me. I've been watching folk horror long before I realised I was watching folk horror. I was watching television in the 80s, and there was a great series in the 80s, in the early 80s, called Robin of Sherwood, which was a take on the Robin Hood legend, and it was full of mysticism and folklore and magic and witchcraft. It's probably one of the only interpretations, actually, it has that much kind of folklore introduced into it, and it was a great series. It was created by Richard Carpenter, and it ran for 3 series, and it was just, to this day, it's got a cult following. It's got a soundtrack by Clannad, which is which has just been re-released last year, but it still has a lot of impact on certainly my generation growing up. But I remember the elements of folk horror in that was Herne the Hunter. That was this mystical father figure that was giving, it was a kind of a spirit guide for Robin of Locksley, and he appeared as a stag in the midst of the woods. He would just appear and direct Robin Hood to his next quest, or guide him on things when things were difficult. And he would be quite a frightening figure. He'd be this man with a sort of stag's head on his head and be cloaked with fur, and he would just appear every now and then. And that actually taps into the real legend of Herne the Hunter in English folklore, which goes back to, I think, when he's seen, there's meant to be a king or someone prominent is meant to die whenever he's seen. So there's those sort of elements in it. And there was Excalibur as well, the film by John Boorman, that again had the same sort of level of mysticism in it. Obviously Merlin's a big factor in the legend of King Arthur, but there was a lot more kind of mysticism and folk horror elements introduced into that as well. And I saw that at quite an early age. I think there was a PG version of Excalibur, because by the time I saw the real Excalibur when I was a bit older, uncut, it's got full of sex and violence. But I think there was a toned down version of it when I was younger, or maybe one for TV or something that I saw. So yeah, I've been watching folk horror since the early 80s, not really realising it, up until when I saw The Wicker Man in the 90s, and I still didn't really know that was a folk horror. I didn't know what it was. So yeah, that was my introduction to folk horror, and not really knowing that I was watching it all that time.
Well, I definitely the Wicker Man was the kind of gateway for me. I think I kind of avoided uh, folk horror, really, again, without even realizing it was folk horror. If you like, it just at some point that just didn't kind of interest me. I think it was more, especially growing up, it was more your like your crazy kills, gore,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And I don't even remember the first time I saw The Wicker Man, which I was racking my brains today on the drive home from work, trying to think when it would be, but I must have been over 18 at least. I must have been. And I just remember being, initially actually, I remember bits of it being creepy, but I remember being a wee bit like, yikes, this is not my idea of horror. But as I've got older, um, I'd say that it's something that I am definitely more kind of open to as a viewer, and I like folklore, and I like the kind of the stories where the land and who's on the land or who's kind of invading it or whatever. I like that kind of that conflict. But I do, there's something, I don't know what it is about folk horror. It's that outsider element. I find it really uneasy. You know, when there's like this collective secret or collective knowledge of something that maybe one person doesn't know. Um, that yeah, that it really unsettles me. And just hearing Edward Woodward scream as he comes over that hill still just
Is it,
gives
oh
me the
God,
creeps.
oh Jesus Christ,
Oh
oh Lord,
God! Oh Jesus Christ!
he's calling out to his, to his own God, which is, quite substantive in the face of, quite literally a massive pagan symbol in front of him. But yeah, no, I get what you mean about the land and things. And Wicker Man is, I think I was in my teens when I saw the Wicker Man I think it was a video released in the 90s, and I didn't really take to it that much. Plus, it was in a very, it was in its worst form ever. It was the only version available at the time, it ran like an hour and 20 minutes. It lost a lot of material, and it never really appealed to me. And someone described it like a musical as well, which it also
Yeah,
is. It is a musical. There's like
it is.
interludes of songs every so often, and I've not really seen that in any other horror movie. Since then, but it all adds to and you talk about that sense of being the outsider, which is absolutely one of the factors of a folk horror, is generally someone coming into the unknown, into a world that's not their own, and falling victim to it. And it's all, I always found, I think growing up with sort of elements of myth and legend and things. When I was young, I remember being quite obsessed with the earth. I would,
Mm.
I would dig away at earth in the garden, just to try and uncover something, like a buried treasure or, I don't know, just something down there, something underneath, something in the earth. And there is that sort of connection, I think, that we have to the land, that actually the landscape it's sometimes uninviting, it's sometimes dangerous, it can cut us off from civilization, it can trap us, it can kill us. There's a danger to it. And then when we think about how much of the land has been covered over centuries, what on earth is underneath us?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I love that idea of something being down there that that either if we uncover, we release it, or we
Succumb to it.
succumb to whatever powers are there, whether it's spiritual or demonic or whatever it's meant to be. But yeah, no, and it's also I think there's a big factor in the testing of religion, or certainly organized religion. Versus paganism of old, the old
Mm.
religion being the pagan religion against Christ and more kind of secular followings. I always find that quite an interesting clash because that kind of ancient history and mystery it predates anything biblical.
Mm.
So
And it seems very much, be good to the land will be good to you, as
mm,
opposed to a, a god
yeah.
determining the rules for your life and what your life is going to look, how your life should look and how you should live your life. Um, it's yeah, there's just, and I always get that from folk horrors, is that there's normally from like the community. the community that know the secret, that know the land. There is a love for the land, and there's a respect and a reverence that they pay it. It's not,
Yes.
there's, and I am kind of referencing the Wicker Man. Obviously Edward Woodward is, you know, really a really devout Christian, and sees these people as heathens, and
Yes.
they're not. They're living by the land provides for them, so they want to give back
They're
by
offering,
way of
yes, they're offering Edward Woodward to the land so that so their crops will, will grow.
fruitful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there is that. Yeah, there's sort of respect for the land, which kind of brings us on to Starve Acre, which is probably one of the most recent folk horror films of the last couple of years. I think it was shot and it was given a premiere in 2023 and then released last September, I think, and September 2024. And it is probably the most recent folk horror film, certainly from Britain. And again, it has that theme of landscape, supernatural, folklore, all the sort of references that would take it into folk horror territory.
Let's take a breath. Let it out.
It's gone now, Mummy.
What's gone?
Whistling.
Whistling. He said someone called Jack Gray is whistling to him.
Your granddaddy bought this land, you know. He was interested in all the stories he'd had to tell.
Who is this Dandelion Jack? It's weird, Jules.
Tell your son he can go now.
I don't really know what's happening anymore.
Gods are just, the gods are fair. They let Jack free and into our care.
I am here for him!
Price we pay is 1, 2, 3 to let joy pour from the whistling tree. The dandelion has blood.
The setting of rural England, specifically the Yorkshire Dales, plays a vital role in establishing the folk horror atmosphere. The English countryside has long been associated with rich folklore, deep-seated superstitions, and the persistence of an ancient belief, providing fertile grounds for tales of the uncanny. In Starve Acre, the isolated location of the farm on the moors amplifies the sense of dread and vulnerability, effectively cutting off our protagonists from the perceived safety of modern society. The film's visual style, characterised by grainy cinematography and muted colour palette, further enhances this atmosphere, evoking a sense of past, contributing to the overall feeling of unease. While the specific legend of Jack Gray appears to be largely invented for the film, the Yorkshire Dales themselves are steeped in their own unique folklore, including tales of boggarts, hanging trees, and various malevolent spirits. Even if not directly referenced, this rich folkloric background contributes to the overall sense that the land holds ancient secrets and dangers. The initial move to the countryside by Richard and Juliet is framed with the hope of the idyllic rural life, but their expectations are quickly subverted which is a common trope in folk horror, and exposes the sinister underbelly of pastoral ideas. The contrast between initial optimism and the subsequent descent into horror underscores the genre's tendency to challenge romanticised notions of the rural environment.
Let's not be forward indefinitely. You know, we've all made mistakes in life, some more than others. But I swear, I treated Owen as if he'd me own.
That's why he scared him into having night terrors.
In what way?
Filling his head with stories of Jack Gray.
Hey, I never mentioned that to him.
Well, I certainly didn't.
Well, anyone could have done. Kids at school.
It was my dad's delusion. You and him were the only ones that told me that story.
Well, I regret how I acted with you when they were young. And your dad were wrong to do what he did to thee. He was. I told him.
Look, Gordon, if Jules wants to visit you, then that's up to her, but I'm fine here, all right?
So be it, lad. With contempt for those around you is only a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Owen's death sort of separating Richard and Juliet into their own worlds, and Richard becoming more fixated on uncovering the carcass of a hare, and eventually the oak tree itself, which he eventually discovers in the same field. When he pieces together the bones of the hare, he finds that the hare has started to regenerate itself, and the organs and the tissue are starting to surround the bones, until eventually we have a complete hare come to life from death.
And
Juliet,
want to be with them.
and they want, well, yes, Jack Gray is the legend, isn't it? Jack Gray's the don't let him in, is the, whatever Jack Gray is, whether he's a spirit or a demon or whatever, he seems to be embodied in this hare that, very much wants to be looked after by Richard and Juliet.
He wants a mummy and daddy.
It's a mummy and daddy. Juliet being surrounded by her own grief. There's almost one thing I did note about the look at it. It's beautifully shot, and this is probably more about setting rather than character. So I'm kind of deviating away from things.
Okay.
But the farmhouse on an isolated moor is kind of Wuthering Heights. Stuff. I'm not a Wuthering Heights fan. I think it's the worst book I've ever read. However, I love the imagery in it, and it did remind me of Wuthering Heights, just that bleakness of a Yorkshire moor and a building, a farmhouse, right in the middle of it. And there's that sort of Gothic tradition that leads into Juliet's character. The female Gothic is that she's entrapped in the world that she's in. She's been brought here by Richard. She's trapped within not just that world now, but also her own grief. So she's inviting anything almost to try and recapture a sense of what once was, including trying to regain communication with her son. That's why she invites Mrs. Ford, a local, to come in and perform. Well, actually, that's not true. She doesn't invite her, does she?
She invites herself. Or
Of course she invites herself, because Mrs. Ford has an agenda.
I wrote that in my notes when when we were watching this. I had Mrs. Ford, ? There's always some woman. There's always some women, and the person that came to mind for me was Mrs. Baylock in The Omen. That there's always this person, and obviously we know now that her and remind me of his name, Gordon, they obviously share. They're in quite a kind of sinister pact with each other, or a kind of sinister partnership, I guess. That was just, as soon as I saw her in the car, I just thought, no good can come of this woman and talking to this broken girl.
Yeah. and it has to be said, both Matt Smith and Morvid Clark are phenomenal. Morvid Clark is exceptional. I've loved her since I saw her in Saint Maud, which is just remains one of the best British horror movies I've seen in recent years. Scarborough Horror. Maud. I love Scarborough Horror, and she's fantastic in that, and she's fantastic in this. And yet, as you say, hugely vulnerable at this point, and being completely exposed deliberately so, by Gordon and Mrs. Ford. And these are characters that we hear off screen to start with. You know, Gordon's reference to filling Owen's head, their son's head, with stories of Jack Gray. You know, the film opens with Owen having a dream saying, "The whistling stopped, Mummy," you know. And Jack Gray is, somehow in Owen's head, and it's Gordon that's planted it there. So we hear of him to start with before we actually see Gordon. So we kind of know, or we're made to be suspicious of these characters without actually seeing them to start with. But yes, sort of preying on the vulnerabilities of a bereft couple in order to release Jack Gray from the earth, which is part of their master plan as it becomes apparent in the film.
Absolutely. It's funny, I've got I just think of Morfydd Clark as she goes through this, and I mean, the first time we see her, she looks on the edge of a nervous breakdown, doesn't she? She just looks
she's
fragile.
She really has. She's got a great look about her. She looks delicate and fragile and maybe out of her world, you know. I don't know. We don't know much about Juliet's backstory, but there's certainly something vulnerable about her from the start.
And an uneasiness.
Yeah.
She seems an uneasy mum, you know. She loves him, but I noted that their interactions didn't seem natural.
No.
It's gone now, Mummy. What's gone? The whistle whistling. Whistling. Okay. You go to sleep now.
Well, Dr. Ellis had already heard about the fair, and he's referred us to a clinic in Wakefield.
Right.
And they're very good, apparently.
Well, okay. I've got to go.
You were in Central Leeds before that?
Do you think that has something to do with it?
Well, sometimes a big change in their environment could, yeah.
Well, we moved over 2 years ago. One doesn't really remember, I don't think.
We thought the space and fresh air would be good for...
Well, that's good for everyone.
So, please, can you tell us what you plan to do for Owen?
Well, we need to ascertain whether Owen's aggression will return by trying to work out what the trigger is.
Owen's not aggressive.
Richard.
I mean, well, he's been in a couple of scraps at school, but he was just defending himself.
Did he start displaying his behaviour at school?
Yes.
But he hasn't given you any other cause for concern apart from this one incident at the fair?
No, he's never done anything this bad.
It's quite distressing, so it's clear that Owen's got, some kind of psychology problems going on to a degree, and so there is this, I think it's clear that Richard, certainly from the outset of the film, Matt Smith is very much caring for his son, in spite of what his son's done, whereas Juliet's a bit more distant. And and this comes up later on when the two have an argument about where was she when Owen had his asthma attack.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right, hard.
I think she's frightened of him.
Yes.
As well. You know, when they're speaking to, is it a child psychologist or a doctor? When they,
I don't think it's clear. I think it's a doctor, yeah.
yeah,
Certainly
and
offering sort of early form of CBT, I think, therapy.
yes, and you know, you can see I've got written down as well, just the huge physical space between them in that office.
Mm.
They just look on either, you know, on either sides of it, and that clearly she thinks that there's something going on, whereas as Richard is, you know, he's not quite ready, I don't
No,
think.
he's not happy. He's not happy to hear it at all. I think what he's
No,
referred
no.
to Owen as being aggressive, and he's not aggressive. You know, he very much defends his son to the hilt, and loves his son, which again becomes the reason that both he and Owen are quite important to the locals, in terms of the ritual that takes place at the end of the film. So yeah, it's clear that, you know, there's a sort of disparity between the couple and the behaviour of their son, and how much they love and care for their own child, which is quite. There's a lot unsaid in this film, and I don't think you need to hear, I don't think you need to hear everything in it. You can read between the lines very much in a lot of this, and I think you mentioned earlier, you know, it is a very much a slow burn. There isn't any hurry to get to any points in the story. It takes its time, and I think that's really helpful in creating the sense of unsettling.
Yes.
Both in terms of the family dynamics at the start, and then after the loss of Owen, you know, the grief in the house, and the space between Richard and Juliet as the film progresses until towards the end when they become close again. It's deeply unsettling throughout. And there's also suggestion that Richard was abused as well by his father. So the house itself is not a happy house. In fact, I think it's mentioned in the film that he brought Owen to the house because he wanted Owen to have the childhood that he never had.
Yes. Hmm.
So yeah,
And he thought it would be good for him
yeah,
to be, you know, to be away from the city.
yeah.
It's that kind of, especially in folk horror, that kind of assumption that, you know, the city is bad, but coming out to a rural area will fix any problems that might be there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, we'll bring him out to the country, and you know, well, he'll thrive there, when actually he doesn't.
No,
Oh,
no, no. He
Pagan imagery and ritualistic elements are present in the film, most notably the figure of the hare. In various cultures, the hare holds symbolic significance related to rebirth and has been associated with witchcraft and pagan deities. Its resurrection and central role in the sacrificial ritual in Starvacre strongly suggest a connection to these ancient beliefs. The meditation and chanting scene led by Mrs. Ford, for example, also hints at occult practices within the community. Whilst not a traditional outsider narrative, Richard's initial dismissal of the local folklore and his reliance on the rational archaeological perspective can be seen as a contrast to the unfolding supernatural events, implicitly positioning him as somewhat of an outsider to the ancient forces at play. The past heavily influences the present in Starvacre. The history of the land, marked by a violent act of public hangings at the old oak tree, and Richard's father's descent into obsession, abuse, and madness with the same legends, directly contribute to the tragic events that befall Richard and Juliet. This weight of history, which is a common theme in folk horror, creates a sense of inescapable dread. Furthermore, the film depicts skewed moral beliefs as grieving parents gradually embrace increasingly irrational actions, culminating in murder, fueled by a desperate hope and a belief in the power of Dandelion Jack. The ambiguity surrounding the true nature of Jack Gray, whether a genuine supernatural entity or a manifestation of character's profound grief and encroaching madness, is a key element that contributes to the film's unsettling atmosphere.
I was thinking of Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie in Don't Look Now, and how such two different couples experiencing a similar experience.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Don't Look Now is the other film of real horror grief. I remember there's a few films. It's Changeling with George C. Scott as well. George C. Scott plays a bereft husband and father who ends up living in a haunted house. And then Don't Look Now is, just horrific, actually. The dynamics between Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, and there's actually similarities there in terms of coming together again. Richard and Juliet come together again eventually, and it's through the love making, which he assumes been maybe the first time since a child has passed. There's the same sense of that in Star of Acre, and actually after they come together again, and afterwards they're talking, and Richard opens up about his abuse, I think, to Juliet for the first time.
That's right, he's sat on the edge of the bed, isn't he?
He talks about his father taped his mouth and made him stand naked in the field as the offering, until his fingers turn blue, which is, and I noted there that that's when Richard starts to break down and cry for the first time. I think we see him, and it's almost that, what is it he says? There's something not quite right going on, and for me that was almost like this is the beginning of him accepting the fate that they both have, maybe without fully realizing where they're going. And
he's given himself over.
Yeah, it really struck me, that scene, that he wasn't sure what it was, but he was giving himself over to it,
It's dark, isn't it? It's really bleak. You feel a heaviness watching this film.
Yeah.
Certainly, I felt a heaviness, and just even from the very beginning. And I mean, I don't know if it's because we're Scottish, so isolated Yorkshire is cold and grey and bleak, and living in Scotland is a fairly similar experience. So you can really,
there is
really feel it.
Yeah, there's that landscape in Scotland as well, isn't there? And you can relate to that. I found a lot of I actually found a lot of it comforting. Actually, I'm a child of the 80s, but born in the 70s, and a lot of the set design actually reminded me of growing up. Filing cabinets, I remember that being in the house. Things like that. There was a real comfort to it. And the way it's shot actually is really grainy. It looks like 70s film stock in some areas. It's really grainy. You get the occasional kind of scratches and the sort of, I think they call them cigarette burns on the film. You get the occasional blotches on the film, which they needn't have that, but obviously it's been a deliberate choice to make it look from that period, as much as the set design and the cars and the costumes and things like that. They've chosen a certain style of film to match it as well. So there's a lot of it actually took me back to kind of feeling like I was looking at a little portal back in time. I liked that element of it. I thought it was really well designed, well shot. So, and I don't know, in terms of the seance, what do we think of the seance? We have thoughts on the seance.
You just know that no good can come from it. It's it's presented as just a she's kind of manipulated Juliet's faith in meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and that being able to really relax,
Yeah.
and she uses that as her in.
Yeah, absolutely. She even uses Buddhist language, which I looked up today. I didn't realise that when I found it. I can't pronounce it now, but there's a certain chant that she does. It's a Buddhist chant. So she even does that to trick Juliet into thinking that this is for her benefit.
Mm-hmm.
The actual ritual itself is, of course, to release Jack Gray, but it's all made out to be that Owen's at peace now, and they've made the contact, and Owen's been able to move on. It's all been a facade. It's all about releasing Jack Gray from the earth, which is slowly happening as Richard's excavating it as well, physically.
And obsessively.
Yeah.
He really obsesses over that ritual of rescuing or trying, not rescuing, but trying to recover the tree and keep it perfect. And as everything else unravels around him, his focus, he has that tunnel vision on making sure that it's exposed.
Playing part in the entire ritual itself is by actually uncovering the tree and the hare, and bringing things back into the present that should be solidly left in the past, really. That the oak tree itself is a tree. It's symbolised, I think, in sort of ancient history, it's a symbol of protection. But the oak tree itself is been the hanging tree, which so because of its horrors and history, it was cut down by the locals and buried beneath the earth. Yet once it's uncovered, we find that it's almost thriving. The bark is still on the tree. The roots are still strong. Everything that shouldn't be happening is happening. And it all in the bloom of spring. That's the idea of we've gone from winter into spring, which is this rebirth theme that I think is going on as well. This idea that things are coming back to life, and of course it's not Owen. It can't be Owen. It has to be Jack Gray. It's almost like a top. Jack Gray can come back, but Owen can't. So yeah, I found a lot of that quite harrowing, actually, as well. Yeah,
hugely. That manipulation. We spoke about that in the Women in Black episode as well, didn't we? About how people will cling to anything.
Yeah.
In their grief.
Yes.
And can be manipulated, and they absolutely are in this one. But you get Richard's desperation is that he's just so desperate to reclaim life.
Yes.
And for him, that he believes by his research and by his excavation, that's what he's doing. But like you say, he's really just inviting these sinister forces. He's tampering with something that, I don't know, maybe it was destined for him from the minute he was born, that this was what he was going to do. We never quite get that, do we? We think there's a kind of, we're maybe moving on a wee bit towards the end of our chat, I guess, but it seems like there's an inevitability with it.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes from Richard's father's failed attempt at trying to do the same thing purposely all these years ago, with Richard himself being offered as a sacrifice. But again, the reason that didn't work is because Richard's father didn't love Richard, whereas Richard loved Owen. So the sacrifice of a child is part of the ritual, and that has already happened. Owen has passed. Suffering of that loss has already occurred. So the next part, which is the killing of a man and then the killing of a woman, is what has to take place next. And it becomes, as you say, it's like it's all been designed by higher powers wherever, because Richard and Juliet become that force that are able to carry out. Juliet murders Richard's colleague,
at the excavation site, and then Richard murders Juliet's sister as the final sacrifice. And
Yeah. Oh, and when he looks out the window, I found this scene the scariest. When he looks out the window, and it's a face that only Matt Smith does, and it's like, I've seen him do it in other things. It's like this, how can I put it? It's like this quiet acceptance.
yes,
It's a nod, and it's in the mouth. It's a kind of, it's not quite a smile. It's just this kind of, and then when Gordon holds up his fingers.
3 fingers, yeah.
Yeah. I found that. I was like, oh, this is, this is going to take a real turn. And it was all foreshadowed. The hammer was there, and, and you knew something terrible was going to happen. But and Richard, I found that really, really chilling.
Yeah, just this sort of the 3 fingers being held up, just very matter of fact, but, making it clear that 2 are down, we need 1 more. And that's, as you say, and I think you're right, actually, Matt Smith's got a very subtle way about him. He's great. Yeah, there is just this final acceptance that, he will do the final part of that ritual and murder Harriet, Juliet's sister. And it's quite a bizarre scene, because it's done with the hare and the cot, and Juliet sitting next to the cot as if she was the mother, and they're all watching Harriet's body wither on the ground as she's dying, and then Juliet takes the hare to feed from her breast.
Nurses the hare.
Nurses the hare, which is just the sort of final chill, really. That
which I text you about.
Yes, that's like she's breastfeeding the hare. That was the text that I got.
Just like, we're going there. Okay.
Yeah. She's breastfeeding the hare, and they went there, and I think that's a great final shot. Happy families, eh?
Does he has his hand on her shoulder, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah. It's almost like a family photo at the end.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It is, and it just finishes there on that wonderful song, which is done by Matt Smith, from the soundtrack as well. So, yeah, it's a great piece of folk horror. I don't think there's huge amounts to it. It takes its time, and it's very effective for it. I love it. It's been one of my favourite films of recent years.
I think that's really coming through as well. Just how articulately you speak about it, and being so engaged by it. I must admit that for the first little while, I was a bit like, right, come on, we could be doing with something, but actually, on reflection, there was plenty happening without that much happening.
Yeah,
and it was that dread, and it was that, and and there's lots of films like that. First part of Hereditary is like that also deals with grief. You don't know, something is amiss, and something's going to go wrong, but you're waiting for it, aren't you?
I think, you're right, and I think that's why it has. I mean, I think Starve Acre does have a lot of mixed reviews. I think unfairly. I think the same with the novel, actually, because I read the novel and I loved the novel. But then other people I know weren't quite taken by it. You know, they sort of expected more from it. I think you get enough. You know, in fact, you get more in the film, because I think the abusive relationship between Richard and his father is I think it's maybe hinted at in the book, but it's, you know, you get it in the film. It definitely happened, you know. So it's, I think the film has all it needs, and I think just in terms of how it's shot and how it looks, and just the time it takes to tell a very straightforward folk horror story, in the style that it does, the direction by Daniel Kokotajlo, I think I've got that name right, I think it's enough. I think the pacing's great. So I think maybe people that don't like it, maybe just they're not quite prepared for that sort of pace of storytelling. I'm fine with that, you know, and it works for me. It was engaging enough. The performances are just, you know, I could watch Matt Smith and more.
Star of Acre appears to be deeply rooted in the tradition of British folk horror, drawing inspiration from both literary and cinematic works. Andrew Michael Hurley, the author of the novel on which this film is based, has established himself as a contemporary voice in folk horror with his previous novels, The Lonely and Devil's Day, often considered alongside Star of Acre as a trilogy exploring the eerie undercurrents of the English rural landscape. Hurley himself has cited the classic British ghost story and writers like M.R. James as an influence on his work, evident in the subtle build-up of dread and the unsettling intrusion of the uncanny into seemingly ordinary settings. Cinematically, Star of Acre explicitly echoes the foundational text of folk horror. The director has acknowledged the influence of The Wicker Man, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Witchfinder General, that unholy trinity that's defined the folk horror genre's key characteristics. Furthermore, the director has mentioned the impact of other 1970s British horror film and television productions, including the works of Nigel Neal, Murrin and the Stone Tape, as well as series like Play for Today, Dead of Night, Robin Redbreast and Penda's Fen, all known for their unsettling atmosphere and exploration of the uncanny within a British context.